to have any connection. So what then happened was, as this runaway reaction was going on, pressure started to rise. Pressure started to rise. Pressure started to rise. Like any other storage tank that exists, this one had a pressure relief valve. That pressure relief valve is designed so that when the pressure is so high, it can vent off the pressure so that the tank doesn't explode. So as the runaway reaction was ongoing, pressure was rising, and then the relief valve vented. And it's this venting of the relief valve that produced so much gas and spread to the town around. The plant was designed for such an event, so they had safety measures in place. But unfortunately, at that time, all the safety measures were not working, all of them. And the one that worked did not work very well. For example, where the gas vented from had a scrubber that is meant to clean any escaping gas. It was turned off. They had a refrigeration system that was supposed to cool the tank when it's heating like this for runaway reaction. Some time before, they had decided that the thing is costing too much money. They shut it off, removed the coolant, shipped it off somewhere. There was a flare stack that could have burnt off the gas. What happened? They had removed the pipe, sent it for maintenance, and were still using the tank. And they had a water curtain. So the water curtain was supposed to produce a curtain of water so that the gas cannot penetrate through and it can catch it from spreading outside of the facility. It worked, but it was designed to be too low, and then the gas went higher than it. So all the control measures, each and every one of them failed. So to follow this diagram, we'll start from 1 and then move in that order. The event happened in tank 610, the one on the very left, or the one furthest away from you on the screen. That is where water was introduced by some shaggy reasons. And then the reaction started and it became a thermal runaway reaction. It was found later that they could have vented some of it into 619 because 619 was empty, but nobody thought about it. Nobody had prepared for such a scenario. When you go to 2, that's the scrubber I mentioned earlier. It's supposed to release caustic soda on it and neutralize them, and this wouldn't have happened, but it had been shut down for maintenance. So it started to vent from the vent line in 3. 4, refrigeration system also not working because management said, oh, it's too expensive, took it offline. The water curtain could have done the job, but it was only designed to reach 12 to 15 meters. The gas went above like 33 meters. It went to about 33 meters. Imagine. So it did catch some, but most of it escaped. And then the flare stack, they had removed the pipe, sent it for maintenance. This illustrates that if you do not manage your facilities that have the risk of these major incidents, serious things can happen. The gas spread all around, and then, as I mentioned, killed so many people. It was truly a terrible accident. So this brings us to the point of why we need a safety case. A safety case is a written demonstration that you have done all you need to do to prevent such major incidents. It is the organization demonstrating to the government, that will be the enforcement agency, but not just them, to its workers, to the stakeholders, that that facility can be operated safely without major risk. A stakeholder is different from a shareholder. A shareholder has shares in your company. So a shareholder actually owns a bit of it, even if it's 5 cedis or $5. A stakeholder is anybody who can be affected by your organization. So all these people who are around the organization, Union Carbide, were stakeholders. So you need to be able to reassure those stakeholders, people who can be affected by your process, that it is safe. And this is the purpose of a safety case. In many countries, this is by law. You need to have done it by law before they allow you, they'll issue a permit to set up your facility. However, I'm urging everyone on this call that even if your laws are not stringent, as is seen in many countries here in Africa, this should be done because it can save lives, even yours, you that you're working there. The type of facilities usually involved in this are petroleum refineries, offshore installation, nuclear facilities. But let's not forget that in the definition, once you have the risk of a catastrophe, you should consider your facility a major hazard facility. So the safety case is similar to risk assessments. You're going to identify your hazards, determine who's at risk, determine your control measures, implement them, etc. But a safety case includes an argument. You are demonstrating, you are arguing out your case that my facility is safe enough. When you do a risk assessment, you really don't have to argue it out to anyone. But for safety case, at the end of the safety case, you should have convinced whoever reads it that, okay, this facility can operate without harm to life, to the environment, or to equipment. So it needs to be supported by evidence to justify it. It serves a purpose of also demonstrating your compliance with the law. And it also enhances your stakeholder confidence, whether it be your clients, people who buy your products, your investors, etc. But the primary purpose is to protect health and safety. The lead investigator of the Piper Alpha incident's name was Lord Cullen. He mentioned that primarily a safety case is about making sure that you are assuring yourself that your operations are safe. That is the primary purpose. The secondary purpose then is to ensure your regulator that your processes are safe. The reason why we should go beyond just trying to satisfy the law to actually thinking about the fact that we want to ensure that it's safe is that this is best practice in health and safety. In health and safety, we aim to go above and beyond the law. So we need to be sure that that facility is as safe as is possible. It should be a living document, up to date. You might go and find a safety case, and after that safety case was developed, they've changed so many things in organization, which means that it's no longer valid. And therefore, we need to apply the plan, do, check, act of continual improvement. Whenever you do the risk assessment, you put in your control measures, you have to make sure that they are working. You have to do regular inspections. You have to be monitoring near misses, monitoring incidents. And whatever information you do from your checks, you act on it, and then you repeat the cycle. Don't forget that you should also have worker engagement. Workers are key, and consultation is best practice in health and safety. Workers who work with the process, who work on the ground, can see things that you as the health and safety manager or officer, or you as the owner of the company cannot see. They will point out some risks that never occurred to you. For all you know, in Bhopal, if the workers have been consulted, somebody might have pointed out that there is a way to actually introduce water that they don't know of, and that could have possibly been prevented. You also need to consult with neighboring major hazard facilities. So, for example, you're in an industrial area. You produce one thing, another facility produces another thing. You're two different companies. You guys need to sit down and discuss how your hazards can affect each other. For all you know, your process is safe until something leaks from their organization into yours, reacts with something with your chemicals, and then boom. Consultation also needs to be with emergency services. Emergency services need to know what they're bringing in case of an accident. Maybe you're producing a chemical that produces a fire that reacts badly when water is poured on it. So they need to know maybe they should bring along foam or something else. You need to inform them that when they're coming, for example, they should wear respiratory protective equipment because fumes that are produced from the accident can kill them. When you want to demonstrate your controls, a bow tie model is a beautiful way to do it. It may look intimidating at first, but it really is not. Let's start from the left. The left states what should be done to prevent the accident. The steps you can take in, the control measures you can put in to prevent the accident. Management of change is so key. Anytime you change anything, it needs to go through what we call a management of change process. There was an accident, I think it was Boonsfield, or I forget the name. The accident was caused because a pipe was changed to a pipe that was inappropriate, and they didn't do a good risk assessment. So the new pipe they installed was not able to withstand the pressure of the hydrocarbon they were pumping, and then it broke off, the hydrocarbon leaked, and there was a major accident. This is because the management of change process was deficient. Before anyone can make any change in a major hazard facility, it needs to go through risk assessment. It needs to go through approval to make sure that that change is not going to cause harm. Supervision. You can put in all the control measures in the world. If you don't supervise workers, something can go wrong. This is because human beings are human beings. We are wired to break rules. If you put human beings together, at least one person will break a rule. There's nothing that can be done about it, but you can do what? Supervision. Toolbox talks so that people understand in a continual way the importance of the control measures there. So you educate them, re-educate them, educate them, re-educate them. You need to make sure that the plant has structural integrity. They are doing regular maintenance. Nothing is leaking, nothing is rusting. All these things will go towards preventing a major accident. On the right side are the things to do should there be a major accident in order to mitigate or lessen the consequences. Because you can't be cocky and arrogant and say that, oh, we've put in control measures so that accidents will never happen. No, you always prepare for the worst case scenario. An example is an emergency shutdown system. There should be a way to shut down the system in a safe way. There are some processes that if when they are going out of control, you shut them down immediately, you have an explosion. So a risk assessment should tell you how that shutdown should occur. Should the process slowly wind down? How are you going to go about it? What is safe? You need to have people who can step into leadership roles when there's an accident. And there needs to be somebody there for every single shift. Otherwise, as the accident is occurring, people are running around with chickens which have lost their heads. Somebody's shouting, somebody's screaming, somebody's wailing, somebody's calling their wife to say goodbye. You need people who are there, who say, okay, we've been trained for this, you do this, you do that, so that the consequences can be mitigated. It means that people need to be trained. People need to know what to do in emergency. You need fast emergency response. That means your emergency response should be ready to go. If you have a sprinkler system, that sprinkler system should always be loaded with water and ready to go. Not that when you're ready to use the sprinkler, then you realize that, oh, water hasn't been flowing for 3 months. So the bow tie model helps you to illustrate what you're going to do to prevent the accident and what you can do should the accident occur. So now we come to the meat of the matter, how to develop a safety case. To fully teach you how to develop a safety case, I'd have to do this for about 3 or 4 days, a full day course, because it's very detailed. So I'm going to run you through more or less a summary of it so that you understand the pertinent issues. To simplify how to develop a safety case is divided into 4 steps. A, gather the information. B, analyze the information. C, act on the information. And D, present the information. So this is just a simplified model of writing a safety case. In countries where safety cases are needed, they usually have guidance documents showing you what you need to do to satisfy the law. But if you're doing this for best practice because you're trying to prevent this accident, these documents are available. And you can always reach out to me. I'll share some of the documents with you. I will emphasize again that consultation is key. The employer needs to consult with the workers, and the workers need to feed their ideas and feedback to the employer. This is very key. Consultation is two-way communication. The employer checks with the workers give feedback. Going to tell the workers that, oh, we are going to do this and this and this. Okay, bye-bye. That is not consultation. That is informing, which is not good enough. Because if you speak to anyone with experience with consultation, it is invaluable. Workers will bring an idea that never crossed your mind. When you're gathering information, you need 4 basic pieces of information. A is a description of the installation. So what are you producing? What are you storing? What are the processes like? What dangerous substances are present? Are they flammable? Are they toxic? Are they carcinogenic? And the nature of the vicinity. Are you in an isolated area or are you situated in the middle of residences? It is all very key information. You need to state information about your policy on major accident prevention. And remember that a policy is not just that first page that we post up on our wall. So it says, we, the organization, are committed to, no. A policy has 3 sections. That paper we post around is just the first section of the policy. The policy is supposed to have a section on roles and responsibilities, clearly stating which position does what. And this is particularly important when you have a major hazard installation. Who is in charge of emergencies? Who is in charge of maintenance? Who is in charge of risk assessments? And you also state something about your health and safety management system. Best practice of these days is to tailor your health and safety management system around ISO 45001. There is a misconception that you need to have certification formally before you can run a management system like ISO 45001. But the truth is that not a lot of organizations can afford this because it's not cheap. What you can actually do is to develop your management system step by step until it aligns with ISO 45001. Then later on, if resources allow, you can get certification. But you do not need certification to run a system at par with ISO 45001. Sorry. You need detailed information about the major accident scenarios possible. And these are examples of major accident scenarios. You need to sit down as a group, think of every single thing that can go wrong, like everything. Prepare for the worst of the worst of the worst. Can there be loss of containment due to vessel or piping failures? This enables you, once you know what can go wrong, to know what you should do in the bow tie. First, to prevent it from happening, and 2, should it happen, what can I do to mitigate it? Can you have a runaway exothermic reaction? May you overfill the storage tank? So if you identify that should something go wrong, the storage tank can overfill, there are things that can be done, like putting in sensors that are linked to a shutdown system so that once you hit maybe 75% capacity, it will shut down, for example. So the major accident scenarios need to be stated clearly and not just as an exercise just to satisfy the enforcement agency. It needs to be done and done well. You need information about the technical measures present. So the technical measures, once again, best illustrated in a bow tie diagram, and will be divided into prevention measures and then mitigation measures, similar to what I've shown before. what can go wrong? Cause 1, cause 2, cause 3, cause 4, etc. What are those consequences? What can we do to prevent any harm from causing loss of containment or an explosion or whatever is your top event? What can go wrong? And should it go wrong, because expect it to go wrong, what can we do to reduce the consequences? The other information you need as well is emergency response plans. What do we do in the event of an emergency? And your emergency response plan should cover what equipment is needed. Do you need firefighting equipment? Do you need do you need emergency showers in case substances spill on people, you need to wash them off? Everything that you need should be stated, installed, and running in good order. You need to do regular maintenance and inspection. You go and do inspection and realize that your pipes have been shut off, or this is not working, or that is not working. Even something as simple as emergency lights. There are organizations that have had an emergency and realize that the emergency light batteries have been dead for years. People can't see around, and then people get injured or killed. One very key aspect of emergency response is how do you alert people of an emergency? If somebody is in the bathroom using the washroom, would they hear the alarm? You have to think about it. If somebody is doing something on a warehouse, a little bit of a distance from the major organization, would they get an alarm? And note that when you are in a residence, or you can affect neighboring residences, or you can affect neighboring organizations, you should have a system to alert them as well so that they can take in the measures like evacuation. And also, how would you intervene? And that comes back to our bow-tie diagram in case of an emergency. In emergency response for major hazard incidents, we have what we call on-site resources and off-site resources. On-site resources are your employees who have been trained to deal with the emergency. Are they firefighters? Are they first aiders? Are they those who know how to shut down the system safely? Usually you would have to have a hierarchy, somebody who's going to be in command, somebody who's going to be in charge of that, somebody who's going to be in charge of something else. And you have to account for shift systems. It makes no sense to have all the resources and people available for morning shift, but for evening shift, there's no one. You have to account for people getting sick, people going on leave, people getting fired. You need backups. The off-site resources are the people outside your organization that need to be mobilized in the event of an emergency. The police, fire service, ambulance services. And when you're putting your emergency plans, you need to consult with them, come up with a plan with them. They should have a protocol for your organization ready to implement should something happen and you call upon them. This means that anytime you're doing your drills, you are changing your processes, you always involve them. Drills are so key. If you don't do drills, you do not see the gaps in your processes. So when you do a drill, things will go wrong. They most likely always do. When you find something wrong from a drill, you don't say, oh you are, and then you move on. No. You go assess what went wrong with the drill, you put in control measures to fix that, and then you do another drill at another time. You find more gaps, do another drill, you find more gaps. And before you know it, you have closed off most of the gaps. Another advantage of doing the drills is that when you do the drills, it makes the process become familiar to workers. So that in the event of emergency, people act almost automatically. If they've never heard the siren before, they have no idea what that siren means, they will just ignore it. If they've never used the evacuation route before, they will ignore the evacuation route. So testing of your emergency response with drills is so key. Then the next step is analyzing the information. What you're asking yourself is, from the information I've gathered so far, is the risk that is left over okay? We call it residual risk. What the risk left over after your control measures are put in place. Are we good to go, basically? Are we going to start this plant in good conscience? Nothing's going to go wrong. In order to do this, you need to assure yourself that your risks are as low as reasonably practicable, what we call allow, as low as reasonably practicable. And the risk should be ideally acceptable, but at worst tolerable, and I'll explain. We consider risk as acceptable, tolerable, or intolerable. Intolerable is a no-no. It means it is too risky. Tolerable risk means that there is some risk, but the processes can go on as we are making that better. And then we have acceptable risk, where the risk is considered to be low enough. How do we then know what is acceptable, what is not acceptable? You do the process we call benchmarking. Benchmarking means comparing, basically. Compare with the law if it's present. Compare with other people's law if you don't have your own law. Compare with international standards. Compare with codes of practice. You can find literature that should tell you that for this hazard and risk, this level of risk is acceptable, this level of risk is unacceptable or intolerable. When you realize that the control measures are not the best, you need to put in more control measures. And you typically do this using the hierarchy of control. The hierarchy of control states it lists the most effective controls at the top and the least effective at the bottom, with the most effective being elimination, meaning completely removing the hazard, and the least effective being PPE, which is personal protective equipment. PPE is not a very good control because one, it only protects one person at a time. And in health and safety, we prefer collective safety over personal safety. And two, it depends on a human being doing what they're told. And history shows that human beings will break the rules. I can bet that at least 50% on this call are guilty of having taken off their mask somewhere they shouldn't have during COVID. You go somewhere, you know very well that you should be wearing your mask. You take it off for one reason or another. It is human nature. And therefore, knowing this, if you rely just on PPE, you are in big trouble. So you evaluate, can we eliminate the hazard? Usually it's not possible. It's possible in very rare instances. Can we substitute the hazard? Can we replace the hazard we have with a less hazardous form? So one way of doing this, for example, is some organizations will store as little of the substance as possible. They're substituting a large amount of flammable substances with a smaller amount so that should there be an explosion, the consequences will be limited. Can we do engineering controls? Can we place, for example, a wall between the tank and where people are so that should there be an explosion, that wall is sturdy enough to contain most of the explosion? Administrative controls, very key. Are you going to do supervision, training? Are you going to ensure your policies are in place and current? And then last but not least, PPE. Because PPE, even though it's not the best, it has its place and is necessary in addition to the other control measures. Then you're going to act on information if you realize that you still need further improvements. An example is you've done your safety case and you realize that we don't have an up-to-date hazardous area classification drawing. Hazardous areas are zoned into 3 zones: Zone 0, Zone 1, and Zone 2. Zone 0 is the most hazardous, means that an explosion can occur at any time. So this is for flammable and explosive atmospheres. So, for example, in a filling station, a tanker comes, pumps the fuel into the underground storage tank. Inside that tanker and inside that storage tank at all times is very highly likely to have an explosion if you introduce an ignition source. Zone 1 means that sometimes during operation, it becomes flammable, but it's not flammable all the time. So for example, around the area where they're filling the tank and around the place where you drive your car to go and fill your tank, when they're operating, a flammable atmosphere is created. But when the operation ceases, the flammable atmosphere also goes away. And zone 2 means that it's rare for you to have a flammable atmosphere. So, for example, if you go to a Shell filling station, the Shell shop, within the shop, it's unlikely that there'll be enough flammable substance to cause problems. So if your organization, for example, is dealing with chemicals that that's flammable, you need to have a diagram that classifies each area. And that diagram should have a clear key and should be up to date. The up to date is so key because the diagram might be an old diagram. And then you move things around, you change processes. And an area where you thought was zone 2 is now zone 0. And because you're not aware, you go and do welding there. And then that's the end of the whole show. So this is an example of a key for such a diagram. So when developing a safety case, the information that is required, you need to take your time and meticulously do it. Because the incident that will occur, if it does occur, God forbid, of course, will be very severe. The last step is presenting information in a structured way. This is paperwork, basically. It means making sure your font sizes are large enough, your diagram should be at an appropriate scale. You can read the things. You follow the best practice in documentation. There should be a table of contents, there should be sections, there should be appendices. Use simple English. You use diagrams to make things easy to understand. If you have abbreviations and acronyms, explain them. Have a key to explain all of those. You need a cover page as well, usually with the name and address of your organization. For the countries with laws, the enforcement agency will give you a number, which you'll apply to that cover page. You'll also put it on each page in the footer. And you also need to place the name, designation, and contact details of somebody who they can contact if they need clarification. And of course, the date of preparation and the version number. I'll end it by saying that in a world of risks, always be the solution. Stay safe and healthy, guys. Thank you very much. The floor is now open for questions. If you want to ask a question, you can type it into the chat box or you can raise your hand.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Aku, for that wonderful presentation. And this, you actually threw a lot of insight to one of those challenges that we health and safety professionals always have at the workplace. So thanks greatly for that. So please, I don't know if anyone has any question. Kindly raise up your hand. So okay, I can see Mark. Mark is raising up his hand. Then after Mark, I will call on Samuel. So Mark, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Mark Motangwe. I'm sorry if I'm not getting the pronunciation of the name. So Mark, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I've developed a HSE case for onshore oil and gas operations about sort of 5 or 6 years ago, and it was a new project for me and my organisation at the time. So I just wanted to sort of share a bit about my experience of sort of where to start with this, because we didn't really have anyone with much organisational knowledge to sort of know where to start. So what we ended up using was the templates available for from the IADC, and that gives a very good sort of structure on sort of how to set about going through the different sections and what to consider, what questions need to be asked, and then how to answer it. So for anyone sort of looking at sort of maybe doing a safety case for your own organization, then there's plenty of information online. And say for those in the oil and gas industry, can certainly look towards the IADC for some good guidance. That very much helped us to be able to put together a good safety case for us, and it taught us a lot. It certainly helped me to go through as a like a new project, but but the results of that helped us to identify gaps that we had in our arrangements and our emergency response, and the people that we needed to have available, and the roles and responsibilities. So it really helped to sort of coordinate everything that we needed to provide that as an assurance document, both to our stakeholders and to the client as well, to ensure that we do have the necessary arrangements in place for sort of safe operations. And that really can help to sort of give comfort to our stakeholders, and to sort of be able to have that sort of demonstration of risk being managed across the board. And it's really like a sort of good training exercise at the same time as well, and that can really sort of help people that are sort of looking at that sort of management level sort of project to really help their organization to sort of take it to the next level. And say highly recommended.
So can you put on the internet for me?
I'd say certainly within the
community,
there's plenty of help. So if anybody does need help with sort of where to start, or a little bit of guidance, I can certainly volunteer to help out with my experience, and say within the IOSH network, there's definitely experience there. So, just thought I should share that with the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's actually really insightful. If you have a link to the document, if you could share it in the chat box, we would really appreciate it.
Sure, I'll find that now and I'll get that posted.
Thank you.
Get somewhere, get.
Samuel, you can unmute yourself and ask.
I do.
Hello, am I audible? Hello, good evening.
Yeah.
Or give me one of your.
Yes, I mean, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Much appreciation to the presenter. My name is Samuel, joining you from Uganda. Just a quick question. I needed a better appreciation of the difference between the safety case and a few of the documents that I do have.
That's yesterday. Go. Carry on. Come. Okay.
Hello, Samuel.
Samuel, please, we can't hear you again. Kindly unmute yourself.
Sorry,
okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, I was just requesting to get a better appreciation of the difference between the two documents that I'm currently working with. That is the hierarchy document, hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control document, as well as the ERPP, emergency response and preparedness plan. If I look at the content of what we've covered today as safety case, I would think actually they are mostly contained within these two documents that I have, the hierarchy and the ERPP. So I wanted to really get a clear difference between the hierarchy, the emergency response preparedness plan, and then the safety case. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Samuel. So they are not to be compared. Those documents would actually feed into the safety case. So the safety case is usually a requirement of law, whereby you need to satisfy the regulator that you can operate that facility safely. So if you had that law, you would need to include those documents, but it would need to go a little bit further. You would need to make an argument to adequately convince them that you can operate that facility safer. So having those documents would be a wonderful baseline, which you would then feed into the safety case. But I was also urging that even with those without the law, you can just do best practice and develop a safety case to convince you and your stakeholders that that major hazard installation is safe. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Samuel, and thank you, Dr. Aku, for that response. So, I will now call on Tony. Tony, please, kindly go ahead with your question, please.
Hello there, good afternoon. My name is Tony Priest. I work in the mining industry in West Africa. So first of all, thank you, David, for a very enlightening presentation. I got a lot of information out of that. And I don't really have a question, but you've worried me a lot. And the reason being is because where I live in Ghana, I live within 1 kilometer from the airport where they store all of their aviation fuel. So I'm pretty sure that my residence is in that explosion zone with regards to their storage. One thing I did take out of this with regards to the Piper Alpha and the Bhopal incidents is often or not, when things do go wrong, it's often or not when maintenance is being carried out. So I think it's important to understand that when these systems and these processes are being maintained, they're often or not the critical points of where the potential is to go wrong. You also mentioned as well with regards to the public and the exposure of the public. Working in mining, we often have to transport explosives to the mine sites. And again, I think in Ghana, a number of years ago, there was an explosive incident in a village. I think it's called Bogoso, I think the village was, where a number of people were killed. So I think it's important to understand that this also applies where transporting goods on the road as well. So I don't have any questions. It was just making them points, and thank you for a very interesting presentation as well.
Okay, thank you, Tony, for that. We sincerely appreciate. We have some questions on chat. Dr. Aku.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm trying to look as. We have some questions on chat.
Okay.
Okay, so I have one there. I understand that safety case is a UK law. How can we make this mandatory in offshore West African industry? I understand that safety case is a UK law. How can we make this mandatory in offshore West African industry? This question is from Ahmed.
Okay. So it's not, first of all, it's not just UK. A lot of other developed countries have safety case ingrained into their law. Your question is a tough one because we don't, in many African countries, we don't even have the basic health and safety law to start with. So the starting point I would say is we need to start from basics. So for example, here in Ghana, we are trying to get them to pass the Health and Safety Bill or Act. And then based on that, we can now build on and build on and build on. So wherever you are, if you don't have health and safety law, I would say start advocating, start pushing, start lobbying, because it's from that foundation that you can now build upon it.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. We still have another question from Dana. Okay, I read. Thanks for the insightful presentation, Doctor. In the case of Ghana, is any sector required to do safety cases for citing their installation? For instance, the LPG stations and fuel stations. In the case of Ghana, is any sector required to do safety cases for citing their installations? For instance, the SPG stations and the fuel stations.
Okay,
Doctor.
so when I was preparing for the presentation, I did do a literature search of our laws. And as far as I know, because I could be wrong, I did not find safety case specified in any of the laws in Ghana. So in terms of it being mandatory, I can say not. And this is why I made sure during the presentation to kind of say that even if it's not in your law, the best practice is to do it anyway, because in the end, what you want is people to be healthy and safe. But I did not come across any of our laws here in Ghana where they specifically ask for a safety case before installing and before creating an installation or starting the process of an installation. But I'm open to correction. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. We move on to the next question. I mean, this question is from Juwon. I mean, and he asks, is it possible to transition directly from zone 0 to zone 2 without having zone 1 in an explosive environment? Is it possible to transition to, is it possible to transition directly from zone 0 to zone 2 without having zone 1 in an explosive environment? Doctor.
Okay, so the zoning is based on the predominant circumstances. For example, the filling station is always the easiest way to explain the zoning in terms of explosive substances. If you take the underground storage tank, it's zone 0, basically zone 0 all the time. What you have to notice that even when it's empty, so let's say you drain it out, it's still considered zone 0 because sometimes there are residues on the wall that when you clean, they can release hazardous gases. So depending on the use of the place, if that tank was cleaned, flushed out, thoroughly cleaned so that there's no hazardous substances left over, then it would, quote unquote, transition from zone 0 to zone 2. But in practice, from day to day, the zoning doesn't really change. Like it's zone 1 at one point, it's zone 2 at another point. The reason why this zoning is done is that the kind of electrical equipment you do, the kind of maintenance work you do, is all influenced by the zoning. It's a death wish to just go into a zone 0 area and start welding, for example, or to use electrical equipment that is not designed for that zoning. So even in electrical equipment ratings, they have electrical equipment that is made for zone 0. They are called intrinsically safe, meaning that even if there's a spark within the machine, it won't create any ignition source. It won't ignite the environment around it. But if you were to take normal electrical equipment into a zone 0 area, you're going to cause an explosion. So in day to day, the zoning doesn't really change, but theoretically, it can happen, as you said.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor, for that response. So, I mean, I have the last question here by Emmanuel. He asks, is safety case only for the oil and gas industry? If not, what is the difference? Is safety case only for the oil and gas industry? If no, what is the difference? Doctor.
So safety case is not only for oil and gas. It's for any facility where there is the potential for a catastrophe. So oil and gas comes to mind because it's flammable substances. But even in our industrial areas where people make soaps and detergents and other products, if there's a potential for one of those reactions to cause an explosion, for example, a safety case would be needed. nuclear facilities require a safety case. So no one can actually give you a strict list for who a safety case should be. It really does depend on if your risk assessment tells you that there's a potential for a catastrophe.
Okay, thank you, Doctor, for that response. I think those are all the questions that we have here. We also have some insightful contributions from Mark, from Jason on the chat. So kindly please go to the chat. You will see some insightful input. So thank you, the doctor and Dami, and definitely we have a lot of applause from people joining us, saying that this is a wonderful presentation. That there is someone that I even read a comment that he said this make him to love process safety more. I think that, okay, David Obriki, he actually said this to the presenter. Thank you for this brilliant presentation. You made me to fall in love with process safety now. I think so many of us don't actually like process safety, but definitely this has really made us to fall in love with it. So thank you, Dr. David. We will now go on to the next phase. That is the presentation of certificates of appreciation to the presenter. So the doctor, please kindly stop sharing your screen so we could actually, okay. Thank you. So okay, please kindly confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, your screen is showing.
Okay, thank you. So on behalf of IOSH West Africa and definitely the Ghana district, to be specific, we present this certificate of appreciation to Dr. David Aku, the Vice President of of IOSH, and definitely the Chair of IOSH Ghana district. We are presenting this certificate of appreciation to you for the facilitation of the Ghana District Network meeting holding today, 27th of April, year 2024, on how to develop safety case for the prevention of major hazard incident. So this certificate is signed by the IOSH Chief Executive, the person of Vanessa. So on behalf of the IOSH West African branch and definitely the Ghana district, we present this certificate. Thank you, Dr. David Aku.
All right, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah. So the doctor, we are moving on to the second phase of the meeting. So I will hand over back to the Ghana district. Thank you.
All right. So my fellow executives, Samuel, are you around?
Yeah, we are here.
Yes, please. Any announcements for us?
So, yes. So would say we thank you so much, Dave, for the insightful presentation. So only what we would mention is the fact that the project with regards to the share and then the clothing industry risk assessment is ongoing. So whenever anything comes up, we'll share it with the team by means of reports, so that we'll all be in the same speed, or we'll be at speed as to what